guys, it's Mo and welcome to my wrap up for all the books I was able to get to in the month of June. I actually did better than I thought I was going to. I'm low-key kind of proud of how many books I read in June because I think it was May I read like something crazy like 20 plus books, but for the month of June I went back to working full-time again, so I knew I wasn't going to read anywhere close to that. So the fact that I even was able to read 10 books to me was a little bit surprising, but most of them were through audiobooks, so that was pretty much the main and only reason why I was able to read so many books last month. Let's go ahead and get into the books. These aren't going to be in any particular order. I'm just going to grab them off the stack. So the first one here we have is The Starless Sea by Erin Morgenstern, and I don't know if this is a controversial opinion on this book or not because I posted about it on, I think I posted on my Goodreads account that I gave this book 2 stars and that I did not understand what this book was about. Like, if my life depended on it, if I could get $1 million, I could not explain to you guys what this book was about. It was just so confusing. So Erin Morgenstern wrote The Night Circus, and I really liked that other book. I think I gave that one 4 stars. This one, I started it, I want to say like 2 months ago, and I had a whole bunch of books going at the same time, so I put it down and I just now picked it back up. I also got the audiobook, and if it weren't for the audiobook, I don't know, maybe I would have had a different experience, but the audiobook narrators were great. I just think it was the book itself. So I'll try to explain this. So we're following our main character. His name's Zachary Rollins, and he discovers this book in the library that has a story in it that are like these fairy tale stories, or one of the stories that's in it is a story that happened to him in his childhood. So this sets him off on a whole adventure, and I honestly can't even tell you. It was just so confusing. Like, if someone could explain this book to me, I would greatly appreciate it, because I don't even know what happened in the end. I think I just was over it, and like the last couple hours of the audiobook I was just like halfway tuned out anyway, because it just didn't make sense. I didn't know what was going on. I feel like there wasn't really a plot or a reason. I didn't understand for what was going on at the end. So yeah, this is probably one of the biggest disappointments of the year for me. I had really high expectations for this one. I didn't buy the Waterstones exclusive edition that had like the pretty symbols on the sprayed edges, but I'm glad I didn't pay extra for this book, even though I did order this one from Waterstones. So I did pay a little more money than if I had purchased it somewhere here in the United States. So yeah, I'm really sad that I wasted my money on this book, but it's okay. Next, we have a historical fiction book, which I don't really read too many of those, but it is a genre that I do like to read sometimes. And this one is called Before Versailles by Carleen Cohen. And this one really just follows a short period of time in King Louis the 14th, I believe it is. Yeah, the 14th. I'm always like, that's a period in history that just really intrigues me and that I'm interested in. Like, I like to watch shows and read books about this time period. This is one I've had on my shelves for a long time, so I just wanted to get around to it. And I listened to this one pretty much exclusively on the audiobook, and I ended up giving it 3 stars. It was definitely interesting. So we're following Louis before he builds the palace in Versailles. So he's just become kind of like a king in his own right. The Cardinal Mazarin, I believe, has just died, who was kind of more taking the lead, and so he's coming into his own as being the ruler of France. And we're seeing him not just with making big decisions for the country, but with his a lot of this is following the love affairs that he has, because he has, as it's well known, the kings basically they all had like so many mistresses during their reign. It's very interesting. I definitely don't think this is my favorite book of all time about historical fiction on King Louis, but I do want to read some more. I do have, I think, at least 2 other books about him that are historical fiction, so I'll have to read them all and then let you guys know which one I like best. But I gave this one, like I said, 3 stars. We're not just following the perspective of him in this book, we're also following the perspective of other characters, like some of the other mistresses that he ends up coming upon, other people just like in court and stuff. So there's also this side mystery of The Boy in the Iron Mask, which is kind of based off of some other like myths and things about that time. So yeah, I enjoyed this book and I'm glad I finally got to it. Next, we have a book I'm not going to talk too much about because I did a complete standalone video review already on this book, and that's More Myself by Alicia Keys. This is a pretty new release. It's her autobiography. I listened to this one on audiobook as well, and she narrates it, so I would highly recommend as an audiobook if you're interested in reading this book. I gave it 4 stars, and I did overall enjoy it. So like I said, if you want to hear more like of my in-depth thoughts on this book, I'll definitely link the video where I review this one. Next, we have an actual 5-star book, and that one is a nonfiction book. It's A Black Woman's History of the United States. This is co-authored by Dana Ramey Berry and Callie Nicole Gross, and this book, it just goes all into the history that you don't really know about and isn't as widely known about Black women's history, and just how essential and present we were in history, even though it's not very covered much in textbooks. I really like this book. I felt like it was very readable and interesting. It's something I could see myself definitely rereading again in the future. We go back and it starts all the way as early as the 16th century, before the arrival of African captives in what is to become the United States. A wide period of time is talked about from about 1619 all the way up to about 2000. So it's not like it's going to be super in-depth of everything, because it does cover a long overview of a large time period, but I just think that it was really well done, and I would definitely recommend this. We have another nonfiction book, and that is In Other Words by Jhumpa Lahiri. This one is all about her journey of coming to learn Italian and her relationship with that. She decided to actually move to Rome, I believe it was. So she fell in love with Italy when she did a post-college trip to Florence, Italy. 20 years later, she decides to move her and her whole family to Rome. She's going to completely immerse herself. And so I listened to this one also like kind of back and forth with the audiobook and reading it. And what's cool about this book is she wrote the book in Italian and it was translated into English. So it actually has both versions in the book. So it was a very quick to read because you're basically only having to read half the pages. Obviously, I didn't read the Italian side. So the left here is the Italian and then the right is the English translation. I just think it was really cool reading about her experience coming to try to learn a new language. For me, I've always tried to learn French, but I just feel like unless I were to do something like this where I completely immerse myself into the language by moving to a country where it's pretty much the only thing that's spoken, I don't think I would ever become fluent in it. And so seeing her journey of being able to become fluent in Italian to the point of being able to write a book in it is really cool. And even like she said with her experience with learning the language that she still feels like she isn't fluent in language. There's so much that she can learn that she's always going to be learning, because I feel like Italian is definitely a very hard language to learn. I don't remember if I mentioned it or not, but I gave this book 4 stars. It's the second book I've read by her. Both of the ones I've read by her are her nonfiction ones, but I do want to get to some of her actual fiction work. Next, we have another book I listened to mostly on audiobook, and that was Dreamland Burning by Jennifer Latham. So I've just been trying to find books on my shelves that I can readily check the audiobook out from the library so I can start whittling my physical TBR down slowly. But this one I gave 4 stars, and I really enjoyed this one. So it's following a dual perspective timeline. The first one is modern day, and we're following her name is Rowan. She's 17 years old, and she finds the skeleton on her family's property buried in the backyard, and it's very old. Like you can tell, like it's not someone who's been murdered anytime recently. And then the second timeline we're following goes back into the year 1921 during the Tulsa race riots, and we're following another 17-year-old. His name is Will, and he is definitely living in a town that is segregated by the Jim Crow race laws. So we know that you can figure out this skeleton probably has to do with something that happened during his timeline. So we're following what's going on in his timeline at the same time with her timeline. She's taking on trying to figure out this mystery of who this person was that was buried in her backyard. I really enjoyed this book as well. It was very well told, and I would definitely recommend this. Next, another audiobook that I listened to was Color Me In by Natasha Diaz. This is one of the few books back when I had a Book of the Month subscription, that I haven't gotten to yet. And so I decided to get to this one. I just really, first off, love the cover on this. I think it's just super cute. So I gave this one 3 stars. I thought it was a good book, but definitely like not like my favorite book ever. This is a young adult book, and it's her debut novel, which for a debut novel I feel like is pretty good. Like for me, 3 stars is good for a book. It means like it's good, but it's not super memorable and something that I feel like I'm gonna be recommending a ton, but I did enjoy my time reading the book, listening to it. It was very interesting. So the main character, her name is Nevaeh, and she is mixed race. She's growing up in the suburbs in New York City. She's pretty affluent, like her family has a good amount of money, but her main thing is she's having to figure out herself. Her mom and dad, her mom's black and her dad's Jewish, have just split up, and she's relocating to living with her mom's family in Harlem and having to just figure out both sides of her race and how that is figuring out, just it's kind of like a coming of age story. She's just figuring out her own like journey of self-discovery, and yeah, so just like a typical YA coming of age story, but with the added element that her race is something that one of the things she's having to work on and figure out what that means to her. There were definitely a lot of things about her that I feel like I could relate to. She feels like she doesn't really fit in with either side of her family fully, and even when it comes to like her friends and stuff. So yeah, all in all, I think this book was good. If it's something that was on your radar, I would definitely check it out and see how you feel about it. And I will definitely be looking forward to reading other books that Natasha Diaz publishes in the future. So another audiobook I got to was The Fountains of Silence by Ruta Sepetys. This is a young adult historical fiction book. I've never read anything by this author before. I have seen her books talked about a lot though on BookTube, not just this book, but I think it's called Salt to the Sea was her other one that she's written. And I really enjoyed this book. First off, I will say the audiobook for this one, it was great. I would highly recommend it for an audiobook. This one gave, I think, 4 stars, and we're following 3 different perspectives in the book. It takes place in Madrid during 1957 when there's the Spanish dictatorship of General Francisco Franco. There's a very big tourism industry going on for Americans, so we're following one of the perspectives. His name's Daniel. He's 18 years old, and he is there with his parents who are doing business with the country. He's really into photography, and it's like a big part of his storyline. The second one we're following, her name's Anna, and she works at the hotel that Daniel is staying at as one of the maids, and they end up forming a friendship together, and both of them are having to deal with feelings about, because the Spanish Civil War has just ended, but it's still, the country is definitely not in a good place, so they're both dealing with that, as well as we're following a third perspective, I believe. His name was... Oh no, I forget. I lied. We follow 4 perspectives. So we're following Puri. She's very religious, and she's part of like she works with the nuns and stuff, and she's related to Anna, and we're following another one of Anna's relatives. I believe it was like her cousin Rafa, and I just really love the story, and it's easy to keep a track of the different characters because I feel like they each have their own distinct voice and their own thing going on. So sometimes when there's multiple perspectives, that's something I have a issue with, is being able to tell the different characters apart, especially when you're listening to it on audiobook. I went into this not knowing really anything at all about the Spanish Civil War, and this has really like piqued my interest in that time period, and I would definitely be open to reading other books about the Spanish Civil War as well. The next book I read was specifically for a book club that I'm a part of, and that is Before We Were Yours by Lisa Wingate. This is a book I'd seen around a bit, but it just never really like caught my eye, caught my interest. I think I might have read the description of it, but it just didn't seem like something I'd be super interested in reading. But it was the book that they chose for our book club, and I ended up giving this one 3 stars. I enjoyed this book. It was good, but definitely I feel like not something I would have picked up. Like I said, except for this specific circumstance. So this takes place in Memphis in the year 1939, and we're following so like dual timelines again with this book. So in the past, we're following in 1939 a girl, her name is Rill, and she's 12 years old. She lives on the river with her family. They're very poor. The book starts off with her mom is in labor with like more kids. Like they have a ton of kids. I forget how many now, like five or six kids. They just live in this tiny little shanty boat on the Mississippi River with their family. Their dad has to take the mom to the hospital when she's giving birth because it's being very complicated. While they're gone, something happens and they end up being taken to this Tennessee Children's Home Society orphanage, and they don't know what's going on there. It's not a good place to be. And in the modern day timeline, we're following, it takes place in South Carolina, we're following a girl, her name is Avery, and she's on track to have this like political career. Her father's a Senate, she's engaged to a fiance, and her wedding is soon, but she's returning home because her father's had a health crisis, so she needs to be near the family. She encounters this woman at a care facility, and it kind of leads her on a journey of figuring out this side mystery, something that can possibly have to do with her family history. So we're following these two timelines. Of course, eventually we'll get to the point where they make sense and they kind of relate to each other. I think this book was really sad and that it was true that there were actually kids who were kidnapped from families who weren't, they felt like they could just sell them to more affluent families that were trying to have kids that for one reason or another couldn't have kids. This book was based partly off of the true story of this actual children's home and this actual woman that did it, so it's just crazy that that's something that actually happened. So like I said, similar with what I was saying about Color Me In, if this is something that's been on your radar, I would definitely check it out. For me, it's not like my favorite type of book to read, but I did enjoy my time reading it. Then lastly, we have The Ballroom by Anna Hope, and I listened to this one on audiobook. I gave this one 2 stars. It started off kind of promising, but then towards the end I was just like kind of bored, and I just never really felt invested in the characters. So the premise for it sounds very interesting. It's taking place in 1911. I read a lot of like historical fiction this month, but it takes place at this asylum, and we're following, I believe, 2 different characters that are there. Okay, we're following 3 different characters that are all involved with this asylum. We're following a man and a woman who are each like, I don't want to say inmates, but the patients there. And then we're following one of the doctors there. The doctor, his perspective is interesting. It's kind of around the time where people were believing in like eugenics and all that kind of thing, like who should be allowed to procreate or not. And we're following the story of these 2. So the names of the 2 patients were John and Ella. This is the first book I read last month, so I'm kind of like forgetting exactly what happened, but I mean, I gave it 2 stars, so I remember I just didn't really enjoy it that much, and I've already started to put it out of my memory. So I listened to some audiobooks. I just kind of lost interest after a while, so I think that's probably why I gave it such like a low rating, and I don't know, just didn't do enough to hold my attention really. So those are all the books I got to for the month of June. Let me know if you guys read anything really great last month. Recommend it to me down below. And I think that's it. Oh yeah, one thing I wanted to mention was I'm super close to having 5,000 subscribers. I'm super excited because like I mentioned, I don't know if I mentioned on here before. I think I might have mentioned it just on Twitter, but anyways, I'm going to be doing a 5,000 subscriber giveaway slash live. Like I'm gonna go on YouTube Live. I've never done YouTube Live before, so I'm a little bit nervous about it, but we'll see how it goes. And I want it to be like happy hour themed, so I want to like make some drinks or something and just like we can talk about books and all that kind of stuff. So I just want to let you guys know now so that you know that's on your radar. That's something that's going to be happening within the next few weeks, hopefully by the end of the month at least. And that's it for this video. Thanks for subscribing, thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Bye!